The FDA is destroying America through disease. And disease costs money. And money is bankrupting. The healthcare costs are bankrupting our nation, bankrupting Medicare, bankrupting cities and states, bankrupting the health insurance industry. And every time they talk about healthcare reform, all they talk about is who pays for disease. They never talk about real reform. They never talk about actually making us healthy or giving us access to real, truthful information about things that can cure disease in America. What about colloidal silver? Colloidal silver is the most powerful antibiotic, broad-spectrum antibiotic that's ever been discovered. And yet people who sell colloidal silver have been arrested and imprisoned, charged with multiple felony counts. One colloidal silver company was threatened with paying fines of $9 million a year for selling a product that killed bacteria. A product that should be used in hospitals and emergency rooms all across America, but instead those who provide this are criminalized. That's the essence of what we're really dealing with here. The FDA has turned our best healers, our best nutritional supplement companies, our best pioneering health innovators in America, the FDA has turned them into criminals. And this is a pathway to the destruction of our nation. I find it interesting that we're told we have the best healthcare system in the world, because if you really look at the outcomes that our people are experiencing, they're not the healthiest in the world. In fact, we suffer from some of the highest rates of degenerative disease, of certain types of diseases. And for example, rates of diabetes have doubled, not just in the United States, but around the world over the last couple of decades. Clearly, the system of medicine that we are being sold is not working. It is not the best healthcare system in the world. In fact, I would say the best healthcare system in the world is the one that we are not being told about. It is the system of holistic medicine. It is a system of preventing disease so that it doesn't become a degenerative condition that costs a fortune to treat, a fortune from families and cities and states and even nations. We can't afford to continue treating degenerative disease when we could prevent it so easily. And if you really look at the underlying philosophy behind this disease mongering and this marketing of disease, it's quite fascinating and a bit disturbing. The underlying message is that when you are born an incomplete human being. You're born with defects, biochemical defects, or genetic defects. They like to tell you that as well. And that these defects can only be addressed through chemical, pharmaceutical intervention. So if you really understand what the drug industry is telling you, it's that you're not even really a healthy human being from the moment you're born. You were born primarily to serve the interests of the drug companies, which alone can make you a complete human being. This is why they give you vaccine shots the moment you're born, because their theory is that without vaccine shots, you have an incomplete immune system. This belief system is very, very dangerous. It is insidious, I would say. And it expresses an underlying philosophy of arrogance and scientific loss of understanding of what it means to be a human being. It's almost like scientism is a religion of vaccines and pharmaceuticals, and they say you are born into sin and you can only be saved through your savior, which is a vaccine injection or a pharmaceutical or whatever the health authorities tell you to do. It's really a bizarre philosophy that underlies the pharmaceutical industry today. If you just look at vaccines, it's an amazing story. Flu vaccines in particular are never subjected to scientific clinical trials. Never. They're never approved after randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. They say instead, well, there's no time to run these trials. They say that these trials would be unethical because vaccines work so well, they say, that we must give them to everyone. We can't even have a control group that has no vaccines because that would be unethical. Well, it's all blatantly unscientific. if you already believe in vaccines as almost a religious belief in the vaccine as your savior, then why bother calling it science at all? Why bother saying that this is the gold standard of science when you haven't done the trials, you haven't done the studies, you haven't given it proper testing in the real world? They don't even know whether vaccines work, these annual flu vaccine shots. They have no idea, and they just roll them out. The FDA approves them, and they are harming people. The pharmaceutical industry has discovered people are easy to scare into believing in false diseases, false health conditions, and especially false psychiatric disorders. We've seen this especially with children and ADHD. There's even adult ADHD now. And some of the symptoms of this so-called disease include things like feeling like you're overwhelmed with too many projects or trying to do too many things at once. I mean, these are functions of everyday life. These are challenges that we all deal with. Feeling sad, they say, is a disease. Feeling stress is a disease. Fidgeting is a disease. And it goes on and on. I mean, even in the biochemistry area, a certain number of cholesterol, that's a disease, and you have to lower the number in order to be, quote, healthy. Well, these are all fictitious, these are mythologies that are presented for the purpose of convincing people that they aren't well and that they must turn to the drug companies in order to be complete. Many people don't know the truth about the FDA. They think the FDA is out to protect us, and this is how we got the U.S. Food Safety and Modernization Act, which was passed into law in December of 2010. And this act would give the FDA even more power, more money to hire agents to canvass the countryside across the USA and begin arresting small organic gardeners and begin intimidating raw dairy farmers and intimidating even people growing food in their own yards, in their own gardens, people who provide food to local farmers markets. All of these people are about to be assaulted by a new regulatory wave of intimidation and oppression that is really targeted against those who produce real food in America. I find it interesting that we're told we have the best healthcare system in the world, because if you really look at the outcomes that our people are experiencing, they're not the healthiest in the world. In fact, we suffer from some of the highest rates of degenerative disease, of certain types of diseases. And for example, rates of diabetes have doubled, not just in the United States, but around the world over the last couple of decades. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration claims to oversee foods and drugs and personal care products. It claims to be serving the interests of the American people, protecting them from unsafe foods and unsafe drugs. But the real story of the FDA is that behind the scenes, the FDA is actively working against your interests. The FDA is actively and knowingly serving the financial interests of the pharmaceutical industry. It is protecting their profits. It is protecting a monopoly market. It is even protecting drugs that it knows are dangerous, drugs that it knows are literally killing people. Even when its own top scientists speak out and say, we have to pull this drug off the market, it's killing people. One drug, Vioxx, even according to the FDA's own top scientists, has killed more Americans than the entire Vietnam War. That's from one drug, and that's from the FDA's own top scientist. You have to ask, eventually, what kind of agency would want people to continue to be harmed or killed by drugs that are so dangerous? And when you begin to ask that question, you get into the answers that reveal the FDA is aligned with corporate interests. It is not aligned with the interests of the people. In fact, it betrays the people at nearly every opportunity. Information. The truth will set you free. The truth will also restore your health. That's why the FDA doesn't want you to know the truth. The truth is powerful. The truth would bankrupt the pharmaceutical industry. The truth would end the patents that protect the pharmaceutical industry. No business exists to put itself out of business. No nonprofit exists to cure a disease that gives it its only reason for existence. You think the cancer nonprofits are going to find a cure for cancer and give it away for free? You think that? Will never happen. If they even found a cure, they would bury it because that would put them all out of business. A cure for cancer, if it really existed in a pill, let's say, because it already exists in plants and in foods and in things like vitamin D, but if it existed in a pill, do you think that the drug companies and the FDA would approve that pill and want you to take it and wipe out cancer across the country so that they could all be left jobless and lose all their investments in the stocks of drug companies and lose all their power and all their authority and all their meaning for existence? Do you think that would ever happen? Not a chance. These companies aren't there to serve your interests. They are there to serve one purpose, and that is generating profits, taking home the money, cashing the checks, laughing all the way to the bank, while you and your family members suffer under disease that could be prevented if you only had access to the information that we're sharing with you, information about what really works. Information. The truth will set you free. The truth will also restore your health. That's why the FDA doesn't want you to know the truth. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration, when it wants to go after someone, when it wants to protect its drug company clients, when it wants to censor someone from speaking out about cancer, or when it wants to exterminate a company that is providing nutritional supplements to the marketplace, the FDA will stop at nothing. It will violate laws. It will violate civil rights. It will violate due process. It will commit international crimes. It will do absolutely anything in order to achieve its goals of protecting the profits of the pharmaceutical industry. What is perhaps most extraordinary about the U.S. Food and Drug Administration is that whatever it says is accepted as gospel by the conventional media and the conventional medical industry. And yet, if you really look at where the FDA gets its information and what drives its decisions, you have to come to the conclusion that this agency is controlled by the drug company interests. For one thing, the FDA is openly paid by the drug companies to review their drugs. I mean, the drug companies must write a check with every drug that they submit for approval from the FDA. So that puts the FDA in the position of seeing drug companies as customers. So it should be no surprise when the FDA approves even dangerous drugs, especially drugs that are approved based on fraudulent research data that the FDA then becomes aware of, but it doesn't even mind that. It's almost like the FDA, it doesn't care if it's being lied to. It doesn't care if you fabricated your clinical trials. It doesn't care if the drug companies are committing fraud. The FDA just wants enough apparent evidence to approve a drug to keep the money going to the drug companies, and that's all it cares about. This system of healthcare that we're sold on is really a system of disease management. It's based on the idea that if you can sort of string along patients in an ongoing state of disease that's never really quite cured, but it also doesn't quite kill them, then these patients can become lifelong revenue generators for the pharmaceutical industry, for the hospital industry, for the cancer industry, and other sectors of healthcare. This isn't really what healthcare should be about. It should be about teaching people to take responsibility for their own health, to prevent conditions, to overcome disease, to experience lifelong health and happiness and productivity and good mental cognitive function so that they can remain productive members of society. And our healthcare system does not deliver that. It does deliver profits and ongoing degenerative disease that is managed but not cured.